During the first year of his second term, President Trump has put immigration at the top of his agenda.
What we have witnessed is a fundamental reengineering of America's immigration system in a manner that has really been wholly untethered to humanitarian purpose or legal coherence.
I'm Carolyn Beeler. We will look today at the impact of U.S. immigration policy, and we'll hear from Iranians who witnessed the violent government crackdown on protesters. We were surrounded by police, this teenager says. So many people I know are dead. And in Brazil, more and more foreign tourists are attracted to this sort of thing.
There's nobody around us. We're so alone and so calm.
The tranquility of ecotourism. We've got all those stories and more today on The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Thank you for joining us today. It was billed as a presidential speech on the U.S. economy and affordability. Instead, President Trump spent a lot of time today at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, talking about this.
All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
Greenland, of course, is a semi-autonomous part of Denmark, which, alongside the U.S., is a member of NATO, a transatlantic military alliance. Trump went on to say that the United States has never gotten anything out of.
I mean, we've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything, except we pay for NATO. And we paid for many years until I came along. We paid for, in my opinion, 100% of NATO because they weren't paying their bills. And all we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it.
U.S. officials have refused to rule out using military force to acquire Greenland. That was an elephant in the room Trump addressed from the podium.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that.
President Trump also talked about immigration during his speech. We're going to focus on that now. In Davos today, the president claimed that restricting immigration has helped boost the American economy, and he encouraged leaders in Europe to close their borders.
The situation in Minnesota reminds us that the West cannot mass import foreign cultures, which have failed to ever build a successful society of their own. I mean, we're taking people from Somalia, and Somalia is it's not a nation.
We will dig into that kind of language in a bit during our look back on the last year of U.S. immigration policy. The approach has been to narrow legal pathways, ramp up deportations, and slash refugee admissions. Krish O'Mara Vignaraja talked with me about all of this. She heads Global Refuge, one of 10 U.S. resettlement agencies. I asked her what have been the most dramatic changes to U.S. immigration policy 1 year into Trump's second term.
Big picture, what we have witnessed is a fundamental reengineering of America's immigration system in a manner that has really been wholly untethered to humanitarian purpose or legal coherence. I think one of the things we're seeing in terms of the dismantling of lawful pathways and protections is the administration transforming immigration from a rules-based system into one defined by exclusion, retribution, de-documentation, and really no legal predictability. For many decades, the U.S. has been a global leader in offering refuge to those fleeing violence and persecution. I think so much of the rhetoric that we heard during campaigns was focusing exclusively on those with, violent criminal records. But what we are seeing is a very different stance. And today, the very pathways that have made those legal systems work, refugee resettlement, asylum, other humanitarian avenues, have been systematically dismantled.
And outside of the asylum process, the biggest change to the number of people able to immigrate to the U.S. is actually through what we tend to call family reunification visas, right? So not through refugee agencies, but just the kind of regular immigration process.
Exactly. And what is curious is some initial language suggesting that there was going to be a crackdown on the border, but strengthening of legal pathways. We haven't seen that latter part really at all.
I was reading an analysis that suggested that legal immigration could be reduced by something like 30 to 50% under the Trump administration, given current policies. Does that sound right to you?
There are reputable institutions who are tracking this closely. And Brookings, for example, estimates that net migration will actually, for the first time in at least half a century, be negative.
You mentioned the southern border, cracking down at the southern border. President Trump said in his speech at Davos today that he acted quickly to seal the southern border at the beginning of this term and that there is essentially no one coming across the border from Mexico. What do the numbers say about that, about border crossings on the southern border?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is accurate. According to CBP, U.S. Border Patrol recorded the lowest number of apprehensions along the southwest border ever in the first quarter of the fiscal year, and that was 95% lower than the first quarter average under the Biden administration. So certainly this has been a focal point of, President Trump, Stephen Miller, and I think they have achieved that.
So some of those immigrants crossing the southern border come from what's called the Darien Gap. That's where migrants cross through the jungle from South America into Panama, into Central America. A little over a year ago, we had a reporter there, Manuel Rueda. We checked in again with him in September, so a handful of months ago, and here is what he told us.
Last year, there were more than 300,000 people who made the crossing, about 20,000 people or more per month. In the latest month, where there are measurements from Panama's government, they counted 7 people crossing in the month of July.
Dramatic drop there. Krish, can you tell us, are all those people staying home or are they heading to other places that are not the U.S.?
We're certainly seeing more migration southward in Central America. We're also seeing fewer individuals who may have used that route to get to the U.S. They are, like Syrians, for example, are not traveling the migration routes that they were before. We are also, hearing from UN agencies that there are declining arrivals in Europe, that we are seeing an increasingly immobile population that has reached Libya but can't go onward. But certainly, we work in Guatemala, in Mexico, and we are hearing from local communities that, they are taking into account that the border has been sealed in whether they undertake what can be a treacherous journey.
And so do you think that increased enforcement at the border is what is driving that dramatic drop in crossings at the Darien Gap?
Yes, I do think that is the case.
So are there migration corridors worldwide that have seen big increases?
So we certainly have seen that migrants are still seeking to go to Europe, as a result of the continued needs to migrate, whether that's war, persecution, climate disaster. But of course, the same anti-immigration sentiment we are seeing here in the U.S. exists in Europe. And so in some ways, we are seeing folks who are stuck once they get to, Libya, for example. We're also seeing some dynamics that are global that have come out of some of the policy changes that have happened here in the U.S. Obviously, as a result of the D.C. National Guard shooting, our policies have been pretty antagonistic to Afghans. We have also seen that Afghans in Iran and Pakistan, for example, have been deported back to their home country. And so there are certainly echoes of what happens in U.S. immigration policy that also occur globally.
For the migrants and refugees who still are entering the U.S., how is life here different than it would have been, say, a year ago?
Their lives are clouded with uncertainty and anxiety. I think part of the dynamic we've seen with our clients who have come through legal pathways is that no longer provides immunity, because we have seen one of the largest dedocumentation efforts in U.S. history, where those who have come through a legal pathway are no longer secure in their future because the administration has revoked those legal status, whether that is temporary protected status, whether that is humanitarian parole, or even more recently with their announcement that they are going to re-vet refugees. These are individuals who've gone through extreme vetting. They waited years in their home country or a refugee camp. Only 1% of refugees ever get resettled. And even refugees are now being sent to Texas from their home state here in the United States and are told that their pathway of certainty no longer exists.
And at the same time, the number of refugees allowed to enter the U.S. has been significantly reduced. Tell me about your organization's work right now. Has refugee resettlement basically ground to a halt?
Essentially, yes. There are a limited number of special immigrant visa holders that are arranging their own travel and then walking into our offices. But really, the refugee resettlement system faces paralysis. And this has been incredibly challenging. We are doing everything we can to continue to help. We're still helping refugees and unaccompanied children who are here in communities across the country in terms of advocating, offering innovative programs, providing the services that they need. We have programs in Guatemala and Mexico. And so for some of the unaccompanied children who come to the U.S. who either don't receive legal relief or take voluntary departure, we're still able to help them. But it has been incredibly difficult because they undertake these treacherous journeys. They come to the U.S. They hope that there is a better and brighter future for them. And then all of a sudden they are returned. And so we try to help reintegrate them through education, job training, mental health services. But it's been very difficult for the families that we are serving here because all they see is adversity. They see what's already a legal labyrinth that had been somewhat predictable, fully changed, where there is no certainty, there are no rules, no laws that they can assume to be stable because it is ever changing under this administration.
You mentioned what you're hearing from the folks who you are still supporting. We talked to a Somali American in Maine last week, Abdi Noor Iftin, and here's something he said that stood out to me.
I do not know a single person in Somalia who actually wants to come to the United States. It's the opposite. I think they're asking us to leave immediately as fast as we can because what they hear in the news is scary.
Is that a sentiment that you are hearing from other people right now?
There certainly is a reticence in terms of jumping through so many hoops to finally reach American soil, to not have any certainty of what the future holds because of the dramatic shifts in our legal landscape. At the same time, there is still such desperation in the families we serve who are fleeing for their lives, where they feel like they have no other choice but to try to get to America, knowing that America has always been that beacon of hope.
We have been talking in this conversation about policy, but I also want to return to President Trump's speech this morning and the derogatory rhetoric he used toward Somalis, among others. How does that kind of language translate into what is actually happening on the ground?
That language, when it comes from a political leader, is obviously incredibly difficult to stomach. Just knowing how our clients are contributing members of their community. They fill jobs that are otherwise going unfilled. They create jobs as entrepreneurs. They want to help. They want to be full-fledged Americans. And the idea of taking one person and defining a people is, I think, really antithetical to the American spirit. But I also think it's dangerous because we see such vitriol and hatred and xenophobia that can translate into actions. And it's incredibly worrisome. And it leads some of the immigrant families that we know to hesitate to allow their children to play on a playground or to go to school or to get a doctor's appointment. And I think that's incredibly hard for families that have lived in such instability, and they finally thought they could let out a sigh of relief when they came to the U.S. to not be able to, and for us to not be able to tell them when in the future they might is very hard.
And does that kind of rhetoric contribute to the anti-immigrant sentiment you said is also on the rise across Europe and in other places?
In the immigration space, when the U.S. leads, other countries follow. And what we've seen is that when the U.S. takes a step back, other countries use that as an excuse. And so absolutely every step and action we take is watched and echoed in ways that are incredibly risky in terms of us addressing a global issue of ongoing migration for reasons that are beyond the controls of the families that have to.
Krish O'Mara Vignaraja heads Global Refuge, one of the 10 existing U.S. resettlement agencies. She's been speaking with us about changes to U.S. immigration policy in the first year of Trump's second term. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Krish.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You are listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. It is still not clear exactly what happened in Iran earlier this month. Internet access is still blocked, but human rights groups estimate that thousands of people were killed in a government crackdown on protests that spanned the country. Thousands more have been arrested. Communication between people inside Iran and people outside the country has been sporadic at best. That is why Istanbul-based reporter Fariba Nawa went to the border between Iran and Turkey to speak with Iranians leaving the country or returning to it. Fariba takes us to the border in southeastern Turkey.
There's an eerie calm at the border gate of Iran and Turkey in a valley flanked by snow-covered mountains. I'm greeting Iranians entering Turkey in Farsi and asking them if they want to talk. The woman says no thanks. She wants to let it go. Her partner says, "We're in trouble. We're being followed." They're bundled up in winter coats, looking tired. Like others I encounter, they've traveled all night to reach the border. Talking to Western press is a crime in Iran. It's especially dangerous now, with the regime trying to prevent information from escaping its borders. Even though these Iranians are on Turkish soil, it's too close for comfort, and many do plan to return. Others fear speaking out because their family members could bear the consequences. The new arrivals rolled their bags straight to a taxi or a minibus to go to Van City. But one man with a 5 o'clock shadow and a black leather jacket sits on top of a small duffel bag. He's looking around, lost. He agrees to talk, but asks that we not use his name. He says his heart has been in his throat until he made it across the Turkish border. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know anyone in Turkey. He's been on the road for several days, mostly on buses. He says he vomited when he tried to eat and jolted awake when he tried to sleep. The electrician who moonlighted as a cab driver says he left a wife and toddler behind in a small town outside of Tehran. He asks me if I can connect him to the Iranian prince, Reza Shah Pahlavi. Pahlavi is a figure many in Iran's opposition movement see as their leader. He's the son of Iran's deposed king who died in exile. Pahlavi lives in the U.S. and has met with Israeli and American politicians to position himself as a transitional leader if the regime falls. Still a big if. But Pahlavi has played a big role in this uprising. On January 8th, Pahlavi took to social media and urged Iranians to go to the streets to protest. He promised outside help. The initial protests by Iran's merchant class burgeoned to a huge movement. But the help Pahlavi promised never came. The regime killed Iranians in the streets. The number of deaths has been a point of debate, but human rights organizations have confirmed at least 5,000 so far. The electrician I met on the border was among those waiting for Pahlavi. And now he's angry at the prince for sending others into harm's way from safety abroad. We had to move to a quieter place so he could explain. He says people came outside shouting, "This is the last battle. Pahlavi will return." He's describing the events of January 8th. Protesters in the electrician's small town asked the military to stand with them. He says about 5,000 gathered that night. They wore masks and covered their faces with shawls to conceal their identities, because authorities and the protesters know each other well. Some of them are relatives. The call for solidarity between protesters, soldiers, and police failed. They attacked us, shooting bullets, tear gas, pellets, he tells me. He remembers seeing a woman in a black coat fall. We couldn't tell if she was shot with a bullet or a pellet. It hit her in the chest and she was bleeding a lot. Still in shock, he matter-of-factly explains there was no ambulance to treat or transport people. He captured much of the violence he witnessed on video on his phone. But suddenly a man grabbed his phone and disappeared, he says.
He says
the regime's men called us dirty pigs who deserve to be killed. They used water cannons to disperse the people in freezing temperatures. Some demonstrators ran away. Others, he says, were detained and beaten. The electrician says he doesn't necessarily want regime change. He wants a government that provides a living wage, individual freedoms, especially for his daughter, and an end to political repression. The regime and its supporters say Israel paid demonstrators to riot, but this man says that wasn't the case, at least not in his small town. Protests are the result of people's pain. No one paid us. The night of the protests, the electrician fled because he saw police cars in front of his mother's home, and he knew the police wanted to arrest him. He says he fled for his safety. He doesn't know what's next. For now, he just needs to sleep and find a way to tell his family in Iran that he's safe. Back at the border, I noticed that there isn't a huge influx of Iranians. Exactly the opposite. This is usually a crowded place with Iranian tourists and traders crossing the border. Most people I see here now are coming for the internet. People like Ahad. He's from Karaj, a city an hour from Tehran. There were brutal crackdowns in Karaj. Amnesty International says one hospital received 80 bodies on January 8. But Ahad says he didn't see anything. He's here during the communication shutdown to connect to do his remote work for an Australian company. I just want the government to turn on the internet because so many of us can't do our work without it. Ahad says he doesn't want outside interference in Iran's affairs. We don't need America or Israel to meddle in our affairs. We just want security in our own country. We have economic problems and we hope that they resolve because people are suffering, he says. Talking to people on the border, I'm surprised to hear that some people are here to enter Iran. One Iranian family living in Denmark says they're going back to make sure loved ones inside Iran are safe. A mother with a teenage daughter who came here to meet up with relatives from abroad says they're going back despite the risks. They participated in the protests. The daughter, 17 years old, says she was hit with blank shots on her back as she ran from police. She says, on this side were police, on that side were police. We were trapped. So we ended up in some stranger's house. So many people I know died. I ask her why she protested. So we can get out of this misery, she says. The 11th grader says she wishes for regime change and for foreign powers to intervene. These are the divisions boiling inside Iran. The Islamic Republic has proven strong enough to crush yet another uprising, this time killing more people than it has since the 1979 revolution that put it in power. But each movement is bigger and bigger. For the World, Fariba Nawa, Van, Turkey.
From Turkey to Japan to Guatemala, more global stories are on the way. You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. It has been a tragic week in Spain. 2 major train accidents have left at least 43 people dead. About 200 others were injured. The first accident on Sunday saw 2 high-speed trains collide. The second crash happened last night near Barcelona when a retaining wall collapsed onto a commuter train. People are in shock because Spain prides itself on its state-of-the-art rail networks. The World's Jerry Haddon reports from Gelida, Spain.
Tony de la Rosa Torrello was driving home to his vineyard outside Gelida around 9 last night when his phone lit up. The alarms around his property were going haywire.
The alarm system told us that the fire brigade was opening the doors of everywhere at our winery.
Behind us as we speak, firemen and forensics experts comb over the crumpled engine of a commuter train.
The train is just 50 meters from our house, and of course we opened our house to all the services, to all the emergency services, in order to help. The hospital was inside our house. There was 60 people more or less. 10 of them were really damaged.
Last night's accident killed the engineer. He was a trainee learning the ropes on a routine run. A massive retaining wall gave way and fell right on the engine just as it was passing. It was tragic timing, but Torreo says the other passengers dodged a bullet.
You were helping, you were talking with them. I was telling them, you're lucky, you're alive. See what happens in Cordoba 3 days ago or 4 days ago.
Cordoba's in Spain's southern Andalusia region. There, on Sunday, the last 3 cars on a high-speed train derailed at 130 miles per hour. They flipped onto the tracks of an oncoming fast train whose engineer had no time to stop. On Sunday night, just after the accident, this technician from Madrid's National Train Control Center called operators on the oncoming train. I'm trying to reach the engineer, he says, but he's not answering. A woman, a train employee, responds, I'm bleeding from the head. I'm not sure if I can reach the engine. How is the train, the man asks. The line goes dead. The engineer who wasn't answering was killed. 42 others have since died. Investigators are focused on what appears to be a faulty weld on the tracks, which could have derailed the cars. Yesterday's crash near Gelida, where a retaining wall collapsed, also looks like infrastructure failure, but investigations have just begun. Meanwhile, many Spaniards are stunned. This is a country that has spent billions on high-speed trains and infrastructure, with most funding coming from the European Union. Each time Spain inaugurates a new line, it celebrates, as it did with this promotional video in 2023 for a line reaching the country's far southwest. But buying or building shiny new trains is one thing, upkeep is another. The Cordoba high-speed line was renovated just months ago after multiple complaints from engineers about vibrating rails. The tracks were last inspected in November. But Spain's Railway Workers Union isn't satisfied. It has called a general strike. Its demands a criminal trial for those responsible for this week's disasters, and that train service is not reinstated until safety guarantees are in place. These demands resonate with train users. At the Gelida station, just a mile or so from yesterday's commuter train accident, a waitress named Paula Escobar waits for a provisional bus. She works half an hour away in Barcelona.
Yo venía en el tren anterior de Barcelona a Gelida, pero este paso fue de
I was on the train that passed by that wall just before the accident last night, she says, coming in the opposite direction. Now I'm scared to get back on a train, she says. You just don't know what might happen. Because of that uncertainty, authorities have suspended all regional train service here in Catalunya. As for high-speed trains, for the time being at least, they've been ordered to run at 3/4 speed. For The World, I'm Sherry Haddon, Gelida, Spain.
The largest nuclear power plant in the world reopened today, despite public concerns about its safety. The facility is in Japan and run by TEPCO, the same utility that operated the Fukushima power plant. All 7 reactors at this plant, called Kashiwazaki Kariwa, were switched off following the 2011 nuclear disaster at Fukushima. The company reinforced a seawall and added other safety features at the plant. 1 reactor was switched back on today. Still, TEPCO's past safety issues remain a cause for concern for some residents who live nearby. Japan once vowed to phase out nuclear power, but has since abandoned that plan. Across the country, 14 other nuclear reactors have restarted since the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Guatemala is in a state of emergency right now after gang members started deadly riots in the country's prisons over the weekend. The violence spilled out into the streets where gangs coordinated attacks against law enforcement in Guatemala City. 10 police officers have been killed. Journalist Claudia Mendez has been covering this in the capital. She's editor and host of the radio show Con Criterio.
What we know now, we interviewed the Minister of Defense on Monday, and he told us that during the weekend, the Minister of Security tried to cut some privileges from the leaders of the gangs that are held in prisons. As soon as they tried to cut the privileges, they took hostages in 3 prisons in the country. And then the law enforcement was able to gain back that control of the prisons. The day after, on Sunday, at least 4 to 5 coordinated attacks against policemen. 10 had been killed.
The violence that spilled out onto the streets, was that widespread or was it just, isolated and sporadic?
The attacks were coordinated and were simultaneous, and they happened in different zones of the city. So people started to get the news in social media or WhatsApp, and then the streets were not as full as a regular Sunday. I'm not telling you that they were empty, but it was not as usual.
So the gangs, in response to privileges being cut off, basically took control of the prisons and took some of the prison workers hostage for a day. But now the prisons are back under control of the government?
Yes, they are back in control, and government has arrested at least 23 people that they are alleging that they are related with the crimes.
So it sounds like the gangs have a lot of power in the prison system in Guatemala. Is that right?
They do have a lot of power. Actually, I had to tell you that they have the whole power inside the prisons. Today, this morning, we interviewed a former prosecutor, a detective from Chile. He was working here with the International Commission Against Impunity. That's a UN-based prosecutor's office that worked here for a decade. He explained it the best, according to my opinion. We have buildings as prisons in Guatemala. Inside those prisons, the prisoners have the control. They manage the prisons. And what the state has, they only have the perimeter. They had to take care that there are no runaways. But there are runaways. Actually, in October, there was a major runaway. So that's the reality of prisons here in Guatemala.
So the gangs basically run the prisons. What were the privileges that the government was trying to revoke for these gangs? Like, how big of a reform was this trying to be?
I can tell you what, after the raid of Saturday, you can see the photographs in the tweet line of the National Police Institution account, and you can see that they are always taking out smartphones, computers, king-size beds, televisions, and money. There was a story during the weekend that they could even call for food delivery from inside the prison and get whatever they want inside.
So these attacks were in response to a curtailing of privileges for gang leaders in the prisons. Is this part of an ongoing attempt for the prison system to regain control over the prisons?
Exactly. That is what is happening. And apparently it began during the weekend, but actually it's been almost 1 year long now, when one of the first plans of the new administration was to isolate the major leaders of the 2 gangs that operate inside the prisons.
Has there been any success so far in reclaiming these prisons?
They have not succeeded in trying to isolate them, and the main problem is resources. When the former minister tried to build facilities as maximum security prisons, it was a total failure. And politically, the president is trying to build the maximum security prison in Guatemala. He succeeded at Congress approving a special budget for that prison, but now is in a standby after a court rule.
The president declared a state of emergency on Monday. Is that a new move, or is that something that's happened before there in Guatemala?
Well, during the pandemic, we have many states of emergencies, and there have been another attempts to declare that there's a state of emergency here in Guatemala. But this is the first during his administration.
And what is it like out on the streets of Guatemala City today?
I've been out in the streets since 5 a.m. in the morning. You can see the same traffic as in any regular day. I mean, walking to my office, I can see commerce is open and it's operating. The thing is that on Sunday, people were on their psychosis because we had this coordinated attacks simultaneously. 10 police were dead. So I went out to report how was the street, and I could see that there were almost no cars in some zones of the city. You could see cars, you could see public transportation, but very few, not for a regular Sunday.
Claudia Mendez is a journalist in Guatemala City who's been covering recent gang violence in the capital. And now we've got updates on a few other global stories we're watching. In Japan, a court has sentenced the man who shot and killed former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to life in prison. Tetsuya Yamagami confessed to killing Abe with a homemade weapon as Abe was giving a campaign speech in 2022. Yamagami targeted Abe because of Abe's ties to the Unification Church. He blamed the religious group for his family's descent into poverty after his mother donated more than $1 million to the organization. In southern Chile, wildfires have killed at least 19 people since Sunday. The government declared a state of catastrophe and mobilized the military to help firefighters trying to tame more than 30 fires. The wildfires have spread quickly because of extreme heat and strong winds. They have destroyed more than 300 homes and forced more than 50,000 people to evacuate. And in Russia, the far eastern peninsula of Kamchatka is facing its heaviest snowfall in half a century. Roads are completely impassable, daily life paralyzed. Videos on social media show cars completely buried with snowdrifts several stories high piling up against buildings. Now, remember Nokia? Maybe the brand of your first cell phone if you were around and using cell phones back then. If you were not, gather round. Once upon a time, in the late 1990s and into the 2000s, Nokia mobile phones were a big deal. But once smartphones came along, the Finnish company's popularity tanked. It has become a case study in how a dominant brand can crash and burn if it fails to keep pace with innovation. Now, Nokia is reemerging as a global leader by pivoting toward defense. Lars Bavanger of DW has the story.
Entering Nokia's spanking new R&D headquarters in a forest near Oulu in northern Finland, I have to step across sticky tape to make sure the soles of my shoes are clean. I'm about to see cutting-edge communications technology, much of it for the defense market, some of it secret.
So during the tour, you can only take photos when we allow that. And this room is one of the places where you can.
The room I'm entering looks like something out of a James Bond movie. It's the size of a small sports hall, walls and ceilings covered in white foam structures that absorb electromagnetic waves. The only thing in here is a brown backpack-sized box with antenna sticking out.
When we do the testing, these are either here in the 3 meters.
It's a Nokia military radio designed to be carried by soldiers in the field, creating a 5G network bubble for secure communications within a small team. Here, it's being tested to make it safe against enemy electromagnetic interference.
In Oulu, we have been already now for 52 years. And the first task was to create a radio communication system for the Finnish Defence Forces.
That's Mikko Hautala, Nokia's chief geopolitical and government relations officer. He explains that mobile communications technology is becoming increasingly important for defence, both on and off the battlefield.
NATO adopted 5G as a military standard last June. And if you look at what happens in Ukrainian defensive war, you see all those drones. So you actually have a massive amount of data that you have to move between these different devices and your command center.
How important is it for NATO as the defence alliance to have a Finnish company supplying this kind of technology so you don't have to depend on, say, China?
I think it's really key part of the strategic sovereignty, so capability of Europe and NATO to really act independently and manage all those networks in a secure manner.
China has reacted angrily after the government banned Huawei from the UK's 5G networks amid security concerns. It's a major...
In 2020, the UK became the first of many European countries choosing not to use Chinese technology when rolling out 5G. The argument was that such a crucial part of a country's infrastructure should not be entrusted to so-called high-risk vendors. The fear was, and remains, espionage or even sabotage from the Chinese state.
And we are starting from here, and we have a couple of gentlemen here.
6G has the potential to become even more contentious. The technology will not only allow for very fast data transfer between mobile phones, it could also act as a radar, because the high-frequency radio signals 6G uses can bounce off physical objects and map them. Nokia's chief geopolitical officer, Mikko Hautala, again.
So it will see things and it can measure things as a network. So it will acquire new capabilities that we didn't have earlier. But it's also, as a system, makes the whole AI era possible because of the speed and capacity.
But as we all know, it's not only about infrastructure in terms of Nokia or hardware.
Now, Nokia does face strong competition in the field of 6G and mobile communications technology from Ericsson in neighbouring Sweden, and Chinese Huawei is still considerably bigger than both of them. But the man you can hear behind me now is none other than Finland's President Alexander Stubb. He's paid a surprise visit to this opening ceremony of the new R&D facilities here in Oulu. That could be seen as a signal of how important the Finns believe Nokia is to Finland and to the rest of Europe. Lars Bevanger in Oulu.
Lars Bevanger with our partners at DW. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Brazil has some amazing beaches. They are certainly a big tourist draw, but visitors are also traveling to the forests of the Amazon. International tourism grew by 40% in the Brazilian state of Amazonas in the first 10 months of last year. Gisele Regatau reports on how foreign visitors are boosting ecotourism in the world's largest tropical rainforest.
Divina Viana is checking her boat as it's about to take foreign tourists along Rio Negro, or Black River, in the Brazilian Amazon. She grew up right here.
Sou nascida e criada na Amazônia, na selva mesmo.
I was born and raised in the Amazon, in the jungle, she says. Viana opened her tourism company, Arquipélagos das Anavilhanas Turismo, 26 years ago.
Eu sou uma tipo assim, das pioneiras, né?
I'm one of the pioneers, she says. They do about 60 to 80 boat tours a year. Most trips are 3 to 5 days. She says she used to cater to Brazilians and Americans, but a few years ago, she formed partnerships with agencies serving Europeans, particularly French tourists.
Desses, quantos são de franceses? Olha, 80%, 85%.
Today, about 80% of her customers are French, she says. According to data from the Brazilian government, foreign tourists who visit the state of Amazonas come mostly from the US, Colombia, Germany, France, and England. Domestic tourism still dominates. 3 out of 4 tourists here come from Brazil, but international tourism is growing faster. That happened because of a marketing campaign and the addition of flights to Manaus, the capital of Amazonas. In the past few years, the state agency in charge of tourism has attended several international fairs. It has also invited foreign journalists and tour companies from Europe, the US, and Latin America to come to the state. The campaign paid off. Between January and November of last year, the state of Amazonas had the largest growth in tourism in the country. Tourists here enjoy activities like taking hikes in the forest, swimming with the local pink dolphin, and fishing. I find the family of Paul Clement bathing at a local small river.
This is my mom and my stepfather.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and this is my grandma.
Oh, my God.
And her friend.
He's an exchange student from France who's studying in Rio de Janeiro. He says when his family came to visit him in Brazil, they all wanted to come here.
The Amazon kind of seemed like the obvious place. When you visit Brazil, you obviously think about the Amazon forest, and it's amazing.
Amazonas is the largest state in Brazil in size. It covers an area of about 600,000 square miles. That's larger than the states of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Oklahoma combined. Clemente's family is on a 4-day boat trip along Rio Negro.
There's nobody around us. We're so alone and so calm.
Amazonas is sparsely populated. Only about 4 million people live in the state.
We've seen a big spider this morning. It was so scary. But also monkeys, birds, and a crocodile also.
Europeans have a long history with the state of Amazonas. The boom of rubber production here in the late 1800s attracted many investors from England and France. It's an industry that caused deforestation and killed many indigenous people. Today, most of the foreigners who come here are tourists who see the Amazon as a place that should be protected, like Clemente's mom, Miriam Sabatier.
The Amazon is, how do you say, les poumons? It's not the earth, but it is the land of the humanity. So I think people estimate the Amazon for that.
Some worry that the growth in tourism can have a negative impact. It can increase pollution and harm wildlife and natural ecosystems. But Marcel Oliver, an independent local tour guide, says tourism has mostly a positive effect in the region.
Incentiva muitas pessoas a fazerem mais artesanato, a limpar as comunidades.
It motivates people to produce craft work, to clean up their communities. They also get more income and can invest in their areas, he says. Despite the growth in international tourism, the numbers are still small. About 75,000 foreigners visited the state of Amazonas in 2025, compared to more than 2 million for the state of São Paulo, for example. Oliver says tourism also gives local communities some power.
Estamos prosperando, tem mais criança, a gente quer escola, a gente quer isso, quer aquilo.
People say, we are growing, we have more children, so we need more schools, we want churches and access to services, he says. One of these communities as we move up the river is Nova Esperança, where 148 indigenous people live. They are located about 7 hours by boat from the state's capital. José Baré is the leader of the tribe. He says they started receiving tourists about 20 years ago, and today it's their main source of income.
A nossa agenda está quase lotada, né? Já foi grupo ontem, chegou outro grupo.
Our schedule is packed. Yesterday a group left, and today another one arrived. We don't stop, he says. Tourists who stay with them can learn about indigenous traditions and how to make yucca flour and to produce crafts with seeds and wood. Baré says tourism has brought them several things.
Hoje, aqui na Nova Esperança, eu tenho educação, tenho saúde.
Today, here in Nova Esperança, we have schools, we have a clinic, indigenous teachers, and we get subsidies from the government, he says. They also have solar power, internet, and 2 churches. But the integration has arrived with a cost. Baré says only 4 of their older people in the tribe speak their native language. For The World, I'm Gisele Regatao, Amazonas, Brazil.
The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston. Find us online anytime at theworld.org. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Join us right back here tomorrow.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. LuminaFoundation.org. By the PRX Ambassador Council, whose members include Judy Piggott, the Gruber Family Foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation, and Gavin Salmonese, LLC. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX.